In this example problem, Wilkins is going to consider the forces in a car crash. Now, while this hypothetical situation is going to look at the force on a dummy, just sort of as a warning, near the end, I'll be talking about some of the safety implications of this relating to actual people. Now, um, in this example problem, we're considering a car traveling at 60 miles per hour. The car will then come to a stop like this. And as it comes to a stop, it will crash into a wall um, over the distance it takes to crumple. So the distance it travels during impact is this distance right here, the amount that is being crushed on the inside. That distance I'm going to approximate as 1 meter. Now, 1 meter I'm getting because about 3 feet, yayish long or so. Um, Seems relatively reasonable for me to the amount that it will crumple. Um, if this was given as more of a quiz type problem or something, it would be specified. This is not something you would come up for. But the purpose of this is to show you how you can take, some accessible numbers like how fast you're going, the mass of somebody, roughly, and get an estimate of the force on the some person. So this is kind of a way of showing how you can come up with reasonable numbers from just an average situation. Now, during this collision, they're going to start with initial velocity of 60 miles per hour, which is equal to 26.8 meters per second. I gave it in miles per hour because that's, I think, much more intuitive to people about exactly how fast that is. But we'll be using SI units for this problem, so we want to have our speed in meters per second in the calculation. The final velocity is going to be 0. It's going to be fully stopped. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to approximate this as a constant force. From the whatever it's hitting onto the car, that force. The constant force will mean that you have a constant acceleration. And so if I look at velocity over time, it's going to start out at the initial velocity, and it's going to go down as a straight line down to 0. The displacement, how far you go, this 1 meter, is the area under that curve. So that's delta x, which is just 1 meter. So I can find the time it takes by knowing the initial velocity and the distance it travels, because that area is the area of a triangle, 1/2 base, which is the time, times the height, which is my initial velocity. So if I want to solve for the time it takes, I can go rearrange this and I get 2 delta x over the initial speed. Now the reason I would want to do this is there's a couple ways of estimating the average force. The way that I'll look at it is that the net impulse on an object equals the change in the momentum of that object. Now, this is in general a vector equation, but because all the motion is horizontal in the direction I'm going to call x, then I'll only consider the x components of these vectors. And so the impulse, there's only one noticeable impulse on here. So if you look at a free body diagram, what you're going to find is there are 3 forces. There's the gravitational force from the Earth pulling it down. on the car, or the dummy equivalently. You're going to have, I should say on the person, the D for dummy. We're considering the forces on the dummy because we're asking how hard does the dummy get pushed. And then we have the normal force of the car on the dummy, so holding up the person. And then what I have is a backwards force that's bringing it to a stop. And this would probably be a normal force as well from the seat belt. So this would be like the seat would be holding you up, and the seat belt is going to be pulling you back on the dummy. Now, since there's no vertical acceleration, you stay at the same height, so your vertical velocity is 0, stays 0, so your rate of change of acceleration in the vertical direction is 0. The net impulse from the normal force upwards and the gravitational force will cancel out. But you will still have this from the normal force that pulls you back. And I'm just going to call that one F. So that's the force that I want to talk about. For shorthand, I'm just going to call it F. And the impulse by that force is just F times the time it takes to do that. So the x component of that force times the time. Now, I know the time. I just said before that it was twice the distance traveled over the initial velocity. And I know the change in momentum is the mass times the final velocity in the x minus the mass times the initial velocity in the x. My final velocity is 0, and so if I put this together, the change in momentum equals the total impulse. I get F delta x over the initial velocity times 2 equals minus mvix. What this is going to tell us in terms of the direction is the force will be in the opposite direction of the velocity, which makes sense because it's slowing down. So if I multiply over, I find I get 1/2 mvix squared divided by delta x. If I plug that in, I get 1/2 60 kilograms. The speed again was 26.8 meters per second squared divided by 1 meter, and that gets me 22,000 newtons. A couple of things I would like to point out now. One thing I should show is that you see this 1/2 mvix squared, the initial kinetic energy in this case. Now, you can get the same result by looking at the work kinetic energy theorem, because the work would be Fx times delta x. If you just multiply over, you get the work equals the change in the kinetic energy in that case. So that's normal. The other thing I want to point out is how hard this is. If you look at 22,000 newtons, that's equivalent to 4,500 pounds of force. Now, this is why you need a seat belt, an actual seat belt, because people are not strong enough to actually hold that much weight. You cannot pull with your muscles strong enough to provide the force to bring yourself to a stop. So you are trying to brace yourself or something along those, you just simply are physically not strong enough to do that. And more importantly, in case there's anybody who may have children, this is another reason why you cannot hold your children in your lap when you drive. If a child weighs maybe 10% of a normal adult's weight, so someone say 160 pounds and you have a 16-pound baby, the force you would need, again, is only about a tenth of this, so about 450 pounds. And I don't care how strong you are, I don't think anybody, or hardly anybody, could ever curl 450 pounds of weight to hold something in with that much force. So the collision itself requires a tremendous amount of force to bring you to a stop. You cannot provide that with your own body, so don't ever attempt to. You always have to have a seatbelt or some other thing that is much stronger than you that will hold you in your seat. If you're not held in your seat, then when you will not be stopped by the seatbelt. You will continue to go forward until you hit something else that brings you to a stop. And instead of moving forward while the car comes to a stop, being pushed over the distance of, say, a meter, which takes a longer amount of time to come to a stop, you will take your average force will be related to how long it takes for you to hit force when you're stopped. If the front of the car is not crumpling while you're coming to a stop, the only time it takes is the time for your body to crumple. So if you hit face first into something, your body is going to travel maybe more like a centimeter before it goes crunched. And so you're talking about a force that might be 100 times larger than this. Something more like 450,000 pounds of force on your body for that amount of time, which of course is going to horribly mangle you. Um, Now, the only time you can sometimes be safe, what you'll find, is if you are ejected out of the car and you skid along the ground, assuming your clothing is protective enough that you don't just get rubbed off skin, um, that you have a jacket or something like that. If you skid to the ground, you can travel a much farther distance, maybe several meters, before you come to a stop. In that case, then as long as you don't hit anything else, you may actually emerge relatively unscathed. Then you occasionally hear these sort of stories. Somebody gets in a motorcycle accident, they go flying, and they skid down the street, and they can stand and walk up and be relatively fine. Again, because the amount of force on their body was relatively small, because they took a really long distance to come to a stop. Um, that is, however, a very fortunate outcome. More often, if you're ejected, you will meet a car or a tree or something, and then again you come to a stop over an extremely short distance and have a really large force on you, which is going to break a lot of your body. So that's why cars are safe. That's why seatbelts are helpful. Is it lets you move forward with your seat as the car gets crumpled. And this tells you two things. One is that you want your seatbelt to be stiff. You don't want it to stretch at all, because it needs to hold you in place. Two, you need a large crumple zone on your car. The larger the front of your car is, then and the more it's designed to compact as you are in a collision, the safer you are. If you are driving a car that has a teeny itsy bitsy front on it, you're not going to be safe in a collision. If you hit a wall or something like that, you're going to have a huge force on your body to bring you to yourself to a stop. So crumple zones are a very important part of it. It's also one of the reasons why if you get side impacted or impacted from other directions where you don't have any crumple zones in there, it can be more fatal because there'll be a larger force on it. If also, by the way, if you're hit from the side, if you take the frame of the road, you can tell that the incoming car is going to hit your car, move it out of the way. You're going to sit still unless you're grabbed by the seatbelt and pulled out of the way. So if you are not wearing a seatbelt, you will fly into the oncoming car, or more accurately, the other oncoming car will move through your door and hit you, or push the door into you. Sometimes there's a misconception that if you don't wear your seatbelt, you'll be flung away from the crash and it's safer, but that is absolutely not true. You need your seatbelt to pull you away from the front of the car, because you don't want to be stopped by, again, your body pushing onto a metal surface. Um, and one more note, safety wise, about this: you can do the exact same type of problem and talk about concussions. Again, if somebody's running at a particular initial speed, if they come to a stop over a certain distance, their brain also has to come to a stop over that same distance. So in this analogy, your skull is like the car and your brain is the passenger. You have to apply a certain force in order to bring it to a stop. The longer the distance is for a given initial speed, you will apply less force. But if you only give yourself a centimeter or two of cushioning, say like you're wearing a helmet, you're running full speed, and you hit into a surface or somebody else who brings you to a stop, your brain has to come to a stop over a very short distance, and your skull has to apply a large force to keep it inside your head, which it will, and you will bruise or damage your brain, and that's what a concussion is. They've found that um, repeated applications of this force, basically, are what it causes significant brain injury in football players. And the only way you would be able to reduce it, unless you change the collisions themselves, unless you don't let people tackle or people always walk slower or something like that, is you would have to have a larger distance to come to for your brain to come to a stop. So, for example, instead of having padding, this thick above your head, maybe you have padding that thick above your head. But then that leads to the problem that you have like a bobble-headed size helmet, and you also need that to like not hit your shoulder when you crash into things. And so, helmet technology, which can be helpful by providing somewhat of a cushion to increase the size, unless you have absurdly large helmets, will not be able to prevent concussions in this way. So you just, for the nature of how you come to a stop over with a certain running speed, will necessitate this sort of injury, which is a problem for football. So the the fundamental point I want to make on this is that the safety of people in these sorts of collisions is determined a lot by how far you can move, and if you provide only a small space in which you can come to a stop, fundamentally you're going to get hurt. And so keep that in mind. It's another classic example, by the way. People talk about steel cars. Cars used to have good, strong steel frames. Those steel frames did not crumple at all. That made the car came out relatively well, out of a collision relatively well. But if you hit a tree or something like that, and your car only bent, 4 inches or something like that, that means your body came to a stop over 4 inches, and you had a massive amount of force on you that probably severely injured you, if not killing you. So strong frames can actually be dangerous to people because they don't allow you to move while you're colliding.